Your Life and Sex Island, Chapter 5, picking up the tab, page 115. Who pays how much tax on income, wealth, and purchases? Start with $10,000. Here's Al and Annie, usually hopelessly homeless. January last year, they found an abandoned American car. Annie worked 3 months last year at the all-night motel as a maid. One day, a man came and cornered her alone in the laundry and shoved a clipboard in front of her and said she had to sign it. 2 days later, Annie forgot to empty an ashtray and she was fired for poor performance. It was funny, she thought, because it was on a non-smoking floor. She never knew that the man with the clipboard was the company attorney pretending to be a union organizer. And Annie had signed. Goodbye, Annie. She could not get unemployment compensation because she had been fired for cause. Jobs were scarce. She kept looking, but, well, jobs were scarce. Al worked for a rehabber landlord, Mr. Arnold. Al was on salary, and Mr. Arnold paid him $143 per week. No one kept track of the hours he worked. Taxes were withheld from his check. He didn't know how to file for a refund. In July, Al was painting in one of the apartment buildings, 44 Aloof Avenue. He noticed that on one side of the hall there was a 3-room apartment, but on the other side of the hall there was only a 2-room apartment. The 3rd room on that side was not connected to that apartment, and it was empty except for some trash and painting supplies. Al was a sly fox. "Say, Mr. Arnold," he said, "I notice you got an empty room at 44 Aloof. Seems a waste." "Yeah," said Mr. Arnold. "I was going to connect it to that 102 like we done to 101, but it ain't got there yet. I'll put it on the schedule sometime next year." "Next year?" said Al. "Next year? Why, you could put a number 103 on the door and rent it now." "Can't," said Mr. Arnold. "No kitchen, no bathroom, hardly as big as a shoe closet. Couldn't rent it that away." "How much you want?" "We got a coin washer and dryer in the basement already synced there. Wouldn't run more'n $100 to put in a shower head and a curtain and maybe a stall in the basement." "How much you want?" asked Al. "What do you mean?" asked Mr. Arnold. "Maybe I know someone who would rent it, maybe I don't." Mr. Arnold stared at him for quite a while and then slowly started to barely nod his head. "I get $500 for 101 and $400 for 102. I suppose I could let 103 go for $100. "I'll see what I can do," said Al. "Better'n where he's staying now." So in the middle of July, Al and Annie were no longer homeless. They loved apartment 103 at 44 Aloof Avenue. They had their own mailbox, actual home address all their own. Secure at last. With a hot plate, it was the Taj Mahal, the Ritz, the Shangri-La. They took a back seat out of the American car where they were staying, and that gave them a start on the necessary furniture. Rent to have was wonderful. You could get a hot plate and just pay monthly rent for it, and sure enough, in a year or two it would be yours. They even got a TV with rabbit ears. Now that they had a joint to stay in, they bought a joint to celebrate. They were pretty damn sure that now Annie would be able to get another job too. Things were looking up for Al and Annie. So where does their $10,000 go annualized? Rent, $1,200. Transportation, $500. Utilities, $1,000. Clothes, mostly Goodwill and Salvation Army, $300. Furniture, mostly from the alleys, $500. Miscellaneous, $500. Food, $6,000. $2.74 per meal. We have to say right here that even with an army of accountants, it would be absolutely impossible to calculate to the penny how much taxes Al and Annie pay on that $10,000 income. Here's one reason why. Take food, for example. Annie goes down to Kroger's or Ralph's or some local store and buys a pound of hamburger for, say, $2.50. Most states don't have a sales tax on food, so there's not a direct purchase tax that Annie pays when she buys hamburger. This would be called a sales tax. Included in that $250 is the profits tax. But how much of the $250 is the profits tax? The profit tax that Annie pays is a tax on purchases. Another part of that $250 Kroger uses to pay their real estate tax. The real estate tax that Annie pays through Kroger is a tax on wealth. Kroger has a butcher in the back who cuts chunks from the side of beef and tosses those chunks into a grinder, and then he packages it, etc., until it appears magically in the meat counter. Kroger pays him wages and withholds from his paycheck his income taxes. The portion of those income taxes that Annie pays when she buys that burger is a tax on income. Okay, Kroger purchases a slab of beef from some other business, a butcher or a slaughterhouse. Part of the money that Kroger pays to them, the butcher, covers the butcher's payment of real estate taxes, part for their profits tax, and part for their employees' income tax, wealth, purchases, and income. In addition, Kroger purchases some meat from one butcher and other meat from the slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse purchases their steers from a feedlot. They pay all three types of taxes and pass them on. The feedlot buys from a rancher. They pay all three types of taxes and pass them on. The rancher, do you want me to stop now? Purchases supplies, etc. Okay, I'll stop. You get the idea. It's like observing a bucket of ocean water and figuring out where on earth every drop of water landed that ended up in the bucket. Okay, although we can't know exactly how much, the important thing is to recognize that Al and Annie do pay all three types of tax: income, wealth, and purchases, even if she never files a 1040 income tax form. To ignore that she does indeed pay those taxes, hidden though they may be, would be terribly dishonest as well as totally inaccurate. I have made the whole thing seem so complicated that you might think I have painted myself into a corner. Not so. The wonder of computer spreadsheets is that to get a good estimate of all the taxes that Al and Annie pay will take me maybe a half hour to set up. Now I just have to jump to results. I can't very well show you all the calculations and tables that are in the book. But I can tell you that Al and Annie paid 4.6% of their income on wealth tax, even though they have no wealth. They paid 2.3% purchase tax, that is the sales tax. They paid 14.9% income tax, even if they never file an income tax form. The income that they have remaining after expenses and taxes, none. Their wealth remaining after expenses and taxes, none. So Al and Annie pay about 21.8% of their income in taxes of one kind or another. True, almost half of these are hidden taxes, and we did not fully account for the multiplier effect, but 21.8% is still a substantial portion of their income. It is more than 1/5, $1 out of every $5. So when you hear that some people never pay any taxes, you know that you are listening to a professional liar. The percent of their wealth paid in taxes is infinite. Al and Annie have no wealth. They, in fact, have negative wealth, a negative net worth. They have two contracts with rent-to-have, those pesky unfunded liabilities, that are of greater value than the goods, the hot plate and the TV, that they bought are worth, by a factor of 3 or 4. They don't even remember taking one spadeful of earth out of the ground, and now the hole is deep enough for 2 graves. Even if they splurged on a hit of LSD and had an IQ blossoming of 10 or 20 points, it would still take great effort and luck to dig out of the hole that they are in. Good luck, Al and Annie. My heart goes out to you. The gendarmes are on your back, and you will make the economy crash when you and those like you can't pay your debts and have to stop buying. Next, we'll talk about Bob and Betty with an income of $100,000. Purchase the book now by clicking on the link in the description below.